Okay. What did he say?
Welcome to everyone. Good afternoon to you. It's a great day to be a Kiwanian. Kids need Kiwanis, and Kiwanis needs you. So thank you so much for being with us today. You all are standing, so let's stand for our defining statement. Kiwanis is a global organization of volunteers dedicated to improving the world, one child and one community at a time. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Is Clay here? Do we have a song today? And no, Johnny Mac, you cannot recommend one today, okay? Oh, no songbooks, great. Okay, we'll go to the next item then, okay? Let me call on Bob Goodell to give our invocation.
Good afternoon. Oh, great love, thank you for living and loving in us and through us. May all that we do flow from our deep connection with you and all beings. Help us become a community that vulnerably shares each other's burdens and the weight of glory. Listen to our heart's longings for the healing of our world. You have blessed us with the joy and care of children. Give us calm strength and patient wisdom as we bring them up, that we may teach them to love whatever is just and good and true. Knowing you are hearing us far better than we are speaking, we offer these prayers in all the holy names of God. Amen. Amen.
Bob, thank you for that line in the names of all the holy gods of the world. And we do not represent any particular faith or religion, but we represent everyone. And thank you all for being part of that. How about guests today? Who has guests that would like to be recognized? Nick?
Yeah, I've got two guests here today. Stand up, Van. Van Langston is a retired principal of Millbrook High School and wants to be here to hear our speaker today. And our speaker has with her Emma Larson. And Emma indicates that she would love to find the right spot in a nonprofit in the Triangle area. So be thinking about her too.
I have with me today Dale Cousins, who's a good friend of mine. She is a Wake County native, graduate of NC State, retired librarian, and my book club cohort, and we welcome her today.
Glad to have you today. Next.
I have a guest, Bob Taylor. Bob's become a friend of mine, even though we have diverse backgrounds. We found a lot of things in common. He's an electrical engineer by training. He graduated from one of those Yankee institutions that none of us are familiar with. Worked Cornell. Yeah, Cornell, Carolina. I think he worked on designing chips that many of us use daily. He's teaching me a little bit about woodworking. He's got a computer-controlled router that makes some pretty interesting things. He's also got a laser etcher that etches in, like he was showing us a photograph that had been etched on the top of a box using a scanner. Anyway, and he starts talking about this stuff, and I said, well, does it burn certain? Well, yeah, but then it has these kind that have protons, and it goes in, and I just fell asleep. But anyway, the most interesting thing is he's married to a woman that's a very creative artist, I guess you would say. You also call her a philosopher. They live in one of those areas that are known for their HOAs, but they happen to have a flock of chickens and a herd of goats. Figure that. Welcome, Bob.
Bob, you're doing a good job teaching him woodworking. I noticed he's got all his fingers still, okay? Yes.
My guest is John Armstrong, who grew up in New Jersey and got here as soon as he could. He's a St. Andrews associate friend and is married to a former Superior Court judge. And what got them down to North Carolina was him getting adjusted to the Southern way of life, going to undergraduate school at UVA, and then having a son that lived in this area. So we're glad to have him down here, and I hope he'll be interested in affiliating with this operation.
So he forgot to mention that I'm also a retired lawyer. So New Jersey, retired lawyer, UVA, 3 strikes, I'm out.
Okay.
He's in the witness protection program down here.
Great. Do we have any other guests today? We always welcome guests at Kiwanis. And speaking of guests, as you notice, I am not Stacy, and I'm presiding today. I'm Buck Lattimore, who's the incoming president, who's supposed to not start working until October. But I've done a lot of this year, and it's been good training. And Stacy has told me that I'm no longer president-elect, I'm president in training. So I'm getting a good course of it right now. In terms of membership welfare, Courtney's husband, who you know is experiencing a real bout with cancer, is home, is doing much better. Please keep him and and Courtney in your minds. Also, Robbie Wooten, his sister, is in the hospital. She's at Rex, and she is undergoing treatment for cancer, and we want to remember that family in our prayers. And Bob, I believe you had a correspondence from Tarver, who is also out.
So here's a text from Tarver. A couple of days ago. This morning I could see a little better out of the corners of my eye, but not much straight on. Eye pressure is still a little high at 23, but down from 27 last week and 42 during my original visit. She's encouraged, but nothing is resolved yet. Cornea seems to be stable. Hopefully more vision will return by my next appointment, which is next Thursday. Now, if you don't mind rustling around for a pen, may I give you a phone number, because he really appreciates the calls. Ready?
Thank you, Bob. Please remember Tarver Salmons.
919-815-6608. Got it? If you didn't, see me afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate it. Are there any other membership welfare items? If not, we have some announcements today. Serving for the Salvation Army on the 4th Friday. Our next opportunity is the 28th of July. Anybody that can do that, we appreciate it. We do need 2 more volunteers
No, we have enough.
for the Salvation Army.
Buck, we have enough. We have 2 already. We have 2.
You have all of them?
Yeah.
Okay, great, fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, we appreciate that. That's one of our good projects, and we thank you for all that you're doing. Also, Hugh Grist is chairing our food collection for the children this summer. Hugh, got anything to say briefly?
Yeah, thanks, Buck. I think, so y'all know we're splitting that up a little bit and doing some additional things this year. Everybody's been pretty generous already. We're cracked 2,000. So we've got this week is our last week that we're gonna be pumping hard for the Urban Ministries Food Pantry. So I've got the cards on the table again. We've got a way that you can send us a check or just pay online with a card with that QR code using your phone today. So again, we just cracked 2,000. In years past, we've donated close to 10 every year. So we would love a good response for that today. It'd be great. And they can really use it. So they're doing great things. Thanks.
Thank you. Please give to this cause. This is one of our annual projects, and we need your help on it. The pancake breakfast is scheduled for October the 21st. That's coming up fast. We have Jason Tyson, who's in charge of that this year. Please see Jason and talk to him about where you can be of help with the pancake breakfast. Our membership drive will be in September. We'll really do some pushing on membership. Robert Cooper is chairman of that this year. Please see Robert and please be of help to him as we get into that month. Today we're proud to have our speaker as our United States Congresswoman, and to introduce her is Nick Fountain.
You know, it's interesting, our Congresswoman is not going to expect me to be saying this, but she's the same age as my daughter. I learned in reading through the material, and that tells me it's just one more reason why I remain optimistic for the future of our country. We got a lot of younger people, including people younger than Deborah Ross, who have their heads on straight and care about the future of this country. This is not the first time that our Congresswoman Deborah Ross has been here, and but I just want to highlight a couple of things. For those of you that don't know, she went to UNC after Brown University. She went to UNC School of Law. She was in the North Carolina legislature for 10 years. She's been our Congresswoman since after the 2020 election, so she's in her second term there. She lives in Raleigh, of course, with her spouse, Steve Wren, and they've been married now, if I calculate right, 29 years. It's important that the committees that she has been allowed to have been appointed to matter, and to me it says that she is viewed as a bright up-and-coming person in our Congress. She's on the Judiciary Committee. She's on the Ethics Committee. She's on Science, Space, and Technology. All those things matter for us here in North Carolina. I also thought it was interesting that you can be on lots of, you can be a part of many caucus groups, and I take those to be folks who have a particular interest in some particular issue. And it's fascinating the ones that, and she's in a lot of those because she has a lot of interest, and people in the Triangle need folks watching a variety of issues. But I wanted to, so she's on the Congressional Moldova Caucus. She's on the Historic Preservation Caucus. She's on the Offshore Wind Caucus. She's on the Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts and Math Caucus. And she's on the AI Caucus. And looking out over this crowd, we should be applauding AI because we don't have enough of it in the room. But with that, and she indicates to me that she'll talk briefly, and then floor will be open for questions, and she will, I think, demonstrate that she can respond to most any. So welcome our Congresswoman Deborah Ross.
Well, it's great to see so many of you again, because you know I love being with you. And I'll remind folks that my father-in-law, who passed away about 15 years ago, was a very proud long-term member of the Cary Kiwanis Club, and he lived in Cary. He moved from up north down here, and my husband ended up graduating from Cary High School as a result. It's just an honor to be with you and to share a little bit about what's been going on in Washington. I know I haven't been with you in person since the end of COVID, and so it's just nice to shake people's hands and see people enjoying a meal together. And I mean, it's fine, Zoom's fine, but it just is not the same as being out and about. And when you're an extrovert like I am, I'm just so much happier to be able to be with you. I have now represented all of Wake County in Congress, because as you know, in North Carolina, we redistrict every 2 years, right, Representative Ball? So so I have represented all of you if you live in Wake County. So my first term, 2020, I basically represented all of North Carolina, all of Wake County south of 540. And now I represent all of Wake County, pretty much north of 440, where the farmers market is, and goes east-west. So I picked up Wake Forest and Rolesville, and now I represent all of Knightdale, Wendell, and Zebulon. And Knightdale, Wendell, and Zebulon and Rolesville are particularly happy because, as you all know, Eastern Wake County has been sliced and diced among congressional districts. And so As much as I love inside the Beltline where I live and where I represented in the legislature, I'm putting an extra emphasis on making sure that Eastern Wake County gets what it needs. And hopefully we'll also be able to get them some more funding from the federal government because they've been overlooked a fair amount and they're growing and need that infrastructure. What I will say is I've done two different kinds of Congress. So the first Congress I was elected to, all three branches were in Democratic control. Joe Biden had just become president. Nancy Pelosi was the speaker. It was one of the most productive Congresses that we have had since FDR in terms of getting major legislation through. I will tell you, much of that legislation was bipartisan. And several of the big pieces of legislation that we got through that are transformational, both of North Carolina's Republican senators voted for. One of those is the bipartisan infrastructure law, which we're already reaping the benefit of. Right now, you might be hearing a lot about the investments that are being made in broadband. For us in Wake County, it might seem like that's not as high a priority, but I'm here to tell you, I have been to all 100 counties. And there are places in North Carolina where you simply cannot get reception. I know many of you may have had that experience in the mountains or at the beach at times, but you know, if you live in Clay County, it isn't good. And if you live in Camden County, it isn't good. And this is really going to help our rural areas. And it's also going to help some of our, let's just say not in my backyard areas, because we have new ways of doing connectivity, and the people who didn't want to get those cell phone towers are now able to get connectivity. And then of course, we're getting this investment in our roads and our bridges and our water and sewer systems, which really need some help. The other bipartisan major piece of legislation that I got to be involved in, and very involved in because I've served on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee since the day I started in Congress, is the CHIPS and Science Act. And this was originally on the Senate side, something just to make sure we had the microchips that we need, that we've seen through all these supply chain issues in COVID. But the House, in an extremely bipartisan way, insisted that we make a generational investment in scientific research and invest in the National Science Foundation and our other branches, our other cabinet agencies that do a lot of scientific work, like the Department of Energy. This investment in the National Science Foundation is enormous for North Carolina, not just for the Research Triangle, because we know Duke and Chapel Hill and NC State and RTI know how to get these grants. But we are now seeing our community colleges get science grants. And you know, you can invent anything you want and have the best and brightest PhDs. But now, I don't know if any of you have been to Wake Tech North, to their new automotive training center. You can't just, you know, fix a car with a wrench anymore. You have got to get this advanced training. And so we have gotten several NSF grants for Wake Tech, including in cybersecurity, in cloud computing, all of these different things. And I am helping our new community college president get the information out to community colleges all around the state about how they can tap in to this funding. And I brought the head of the National Science Foundation to Wake County right before Thanksgiving last year. And he went to NC State and was very impressed, but he insisted on meeting with the students at Wake Tech. The other bipartisan piece of legislation that was historic that we got done last session, and again, both of our Republican senators voted for it, was the first comprehensive gun safety legislation we have had in a generation. And this was everything from identifying people who have mental health issues, to rewarding states that have red flag laws, to making sure that people who have violent juvenile offenses have a second look before they can get a firearm. And if you talk to Senator Tillis, he is tallying the number of lives saved because of this law. And I am very, very proud to have worked with him on it. This session of Congress, oh, I also need to say, I brought back more than $35 million in community projects last session of Congress, including 2 projects to help with affordable housing, one in Raleigh at Kings Ridge, one in Cary. We also got money to upfit a Rosenwald school in Wendell. As I said, nobody had ever gotten Wendell $2 million to do something like that, to upfit that school in the unincorporated area that is now getting incorporated into Wendell, and so many other things. And passed 11 pieces of legislation, the vast majority of them bipartisan, everything from judicial ethics to sexual assault nurse examiners to more EV charging stations and offshore wind. But here we are in divided government. And the House is now controlled by the Republicans. I serve on the same committees that I served on before, but I was taken off the Rules Committee because, of course, that's the Speaker's Committee, so not enough slots for that, and put onto the Ethics Committee during the time of George Santos. But I cannot comment on anything that the Ethics Committee is doing. So I'll take any question you have, but not about the Ethics Committee. I will tell you, though, both the Ethics Committee and the Science Committee are tremendously bipartisan. We rarely have a partisan vote in either of those committees. And they are 2 of my favorite committees to serve on because I get a lot of bipartisan work done. As a matter of fact, I just introduced a bill today with one of my Republican colleagues from Iowa that will help NC State with advanced research on how to be more productive in making crops, in growing crops, but in an environmentally sensitive way. And I just love both of those committees. I am now the ranking member on the Environment Subcommittee of Science, Space, and Technology. We have had extremely bipartisan hearings, and our major thing that we have to do is get the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, which is basically the weather people, reauthorized. And this is a very, very bipartisan endeavor. It's very important to our agricultural community. It's important to our coastal and tourism community. And as we just saw in Rocky Mount, it's important to everybody because we need to be able to predict big weather events and keep people safe and protect life and property. So no matter who's in charge, I'm always going to try to get things done. And we'll see where it's going to be budget season again in September. So far, even in the minority, I have gotten every single community project that I've requested included in the Republican budgets. Every single project. Some of them at a little bit lower rate than the communities would like, but they're still going to get something. And it is my goal to have those projects stay in the budget, and then of course put the pressure on Senator Tillis and Senator Budd to keep them in the budget when they go to the Senate side. I'll finish my remarks with this. I have, in addition to all these great people who work for me in Washington, 4 of whom are from Wake County, and you probably know their parents. I have an amazing staff here in my Raleigh office. And my Raleigh office is in the old post office right across from the PNC building on Fayetteville Street, right by the old courthouse. And we have helped people with passports, with VA records, with the IRS. We have returned to the people of Wake County almost $20 million of their own money, which is either a tax refund, getting their Social Security, getting their VA benefits. And the people who work for me in that office take such pride in caring about making sure that the federal government works for the people of Wake County. And they are just fantastic people. Emma is now in that office for the next couple of months, and she's coming around with me to different areas. But there are people who just answer the phone the old-fashioned way every single solitary day and help people. So reach out to them. We also have a website, ross.house.gov. And with that, I will take any question that you all have. Gary, I'm so surprised that you're the first question.
Well, you brought up about the Rosenthal schools, and I remember a little bit about it, but I didn't realize there was one left in Wake County.
Yeah,
Is it
there
part
are
of the
several in Wake County. You just call up Miss Virginia Talley. You know her. She lives in Southeast Raleigh. Miss Virginia Talley will take you on a tour of Rosenwald's schools.
Are they public schools?
So they're not schools anymore. So they now have become other things. But what happened, I don't know, if for those of you who may have been to the General Assembly, I don't know if you remember Miss Mary Perry, who was a sergeant at arms on the Senate side. Well, her church is right next door to a former Rosenwald school that is in complete disarray, but that the community, including the Town Council of Wendell and the Chamber of Commerce, want to revitalize into a community center. And also it has a fair amount of land, but it's right next to the church. And so the pastor of that church, Chamber of Commerce, the folks in Wendell all came together with a plan for how to get that school to be turned into a community center. And so the small part that I could play in that was getting $2 million from the federal government to pay for that. And so they are in the architecture and construction process right now, and just go visit it.
Follow-up question.
Yes.
Just a request. Would you tell the club the history of the Rosenwald schools? When they
Sure.
were started?
I'll just be brief about that, but you know, not to stir the pot, but you know, we did have segregation in the South, and Black kids weren't allowed to go to school with white kids, and sometimes didn't have anywhere to go to school, and so the Rosenwalds came down and built public schools for Black children and educated them. And there were certain areas of Raleigh in particular where that were identified as very friendly to this. Obviously this place in Wendell, which I actually didn't know about before, but the Method community, which is near NC State, if you all know where the Method community is. And then obviously the Oberlin community, which we've been hearing so much more about because of the revitalization of its history and bringing back some of those homes through historic preservation. As a matter of fact, Preservation North Carolina moved its office from downtown Raleigh to the Oberlin community. So this was not just in North Carolina, it was all over the South. I do not personally know every location, but you could Google it. And if you want a tour and you want kind of an oral history about it, Miss Virginia Talley would be happy to share that with you. Yes.
I'm going to pose a question very similar to the one I posed to David Price 20 years ago.
Okay, I wasn't here, so it'll be new to me.
When is someone going to take the lead on funding reforms for Medicare and Social Security?
Well, somebody has taken the lead on that. His name is John Larson. He represents Connecticut, kind of not fancy part of Connecticut. And he has several ideas for how to shore up the Social Security Trust Fund in particular, including raising the cap, the income cap, which would be probably the most popular way of doing that. The main problem why it doesn't happen is because we have had such divided government. I was actually hopeful that we would do that last session when the Democrats had all three branches. What we did do was work on Medicare and negotiating prescription drug prices, which is something that has been, an issue for decades. And finally, we will be able to negotiate prescription drug prices. Finally, seniors will be able to get free vaccines. Finally, we have a cap on the cost of insulin at $35. And by the way, a bunch of drug companies are now making insulin $35 for people who aren't on Medicare. So last session, we took some good steps on Medicare. I have always signed on to John Larson's bill. I will tell you, it is unfortunate, it is not a bipartisan bill. And so we need to do that work, but I stand ready to do it. And I don't know if I'll be there in 20 years, but feel free to ask me the question in 10, because I plan on staying at least 10 more. Any other questions? Yes, Nick.
Two families of great folks, and it was obvious that English was a second language, and we talked a long time, and it became clear they'd been here 15 or 20 years, working hard, paying taxes, but still not citizens, and at least one of them can't get a driver's license, and so I'm thinking he's driving that truck around, but I'm
Don't
thinking,
turn 'em in.
these are great folks, and the quality of the work was superb. What are we going to do about immigration?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question. And I'm here to tell you, I got an award. You know my district, right? I just told you where it is. I don't have a lot of farms in my district. I got an award from the Farm Bureau for doing work on comprehensive immigration reform. I've been working on this since I was in the state legislature. And this, again, is something that Senator Tillis has really been a leader on. And I've been doing a lot of work with him. So the bottom line is this. When we have divided government, we cannot get comprehensive immigration reform. We passed two really important bills through the House in the last session of Congress. And there were Republicans who would support it, just not 10, because we have a filibuster on the Senate side. So you have to get more than 10 Republicans, but there were Republicans in favor of it. And it was a Farm Worker Modernization Act, which, let me tell you, I was in the General Assembly 20 years ago. And the agriculture community has been asking for comprehensive immigration reform for farm workers because they don't want to hire people who are illegal. And the people who work for them don't all want to stay in the United States, but they're afraid that if they come to the United States to work and then they stay over even a week, and then they go back, they won't be able to come back again. And we have got to have a way where workers come here and work and then can go back to wherever their home is, where they actually would prefer to live because they don't necessarily have a job when we're not pulling crops. We just absolutely have got to do that. And the second piece was the American Dream and Promise Act, which dealt with our dreamers. And I learned something. I don't know, how many people here have ever heard of a documented dreamer? Do you know what that is? Okay, a couple people. So we got a lot of them here in North Carolina. These are kids who came with their parents legally because their parents came to work in technology or medicine or teach at a university. And the kid came when the kid was, 2, 4, 5 years old. Because of the backlog in our immigration system, they cannot get a visa extension when they turn 21 and have to self-deport. So these are 250,000 kids who were educated in this country. The vast majority of them are in college in a STEM field, They want to stay in this country, and they're having to self-deport to our competitors. Stupid. Stupid. It is one of the #1 priority of the business community and the tech community to make sure that we fix our immigration system. I have a bipartisan bill. I got it through the House in 2 different forms with a female, Republican female physician from Iowa. She and I got, Rand Paul is for this bill. But the problem is that everybody they won't do these one bill, one good thing for the farmers or one good thing for the dreamers. Everybody wants a comprehensive package that also includes the border and all of these other things. I sit on the Immigration Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee. I have been to the border. I went there last spring. We were in Brownsville and McAllen. I am here to tell you that the mayor of Brownsville is extraordinary in how he deals with people who come across the border. He figures out how to get them, because once they come legally, he don't want them to stay in Brownsville, right? He wants them gone. He basically runs a travel agency next to the bus depot and makes sure that people get out of Brownsville. They've come legally. These are not the illegal ones. Get them out in 24 hours. Who's your sponsor? Where are you supposed to? I mean, he has hired people to deal with this situation. We were there for like 2 hours, and then we sat down with him and the people who helped this. When I went to the border, we were right there at the wall-ish, because it's not really a wall. There's like openings, and it's not very tall, by the way. And every single border control person said, we do not need to build a physical wall, we need technology. That the bad guys, the cartels and the coyotes and all these people, they have drones, they know where you can get through. And if we gave them the kind of technology that we give the US military, they want these big, they're like aerial blimps so that they can see all the way around, they could keep more people from crossing the border illegally. And we have got to invest in that. So Senator Tillis is working on this on the Senate side. I am working on it on the Immigration Subcommittee. But we have got to get together and do it. We've got to get together and do it for the good of, we don't have enough people for the jobs that we're creating. We have got to do it for the agricultural industry. We've got to do it for the safety and security of this nation. There are ways to do it, but we have got to stop politicizing it. And I'll get off my soapbox in just 1 second after this. So we had a hearing in the Immigration Subcommittee last week about how dangerous immigrants make our country. And there are dangerous immigrants who commit crimes. And there are people who sell drugs. And we got to arrest them and round them up and get them out of our country. But the immigrant community does not commit crimes at a greater rate than natural-born citizens. And my colleague, Veronica Escobar, who represents the border, had this huge graph of who commits hate to break it to you guys, natural-born Americans commit more crimes than immigrants do. Now, there are very bad immigrants. Get rid of them, round them up, send them home. But we cannot demonize people who are picking painting your house and picking our food and working in our tech community and working in, and then that creates these hate crimes that go on. And so I use my 5 minutes to talk about Morrisville, North Carolina, which has the highest concentration of immigrants of any city or town in North Carolina. It also has one of the lowest rates of poverty, one of the highest graduation rates, and one of the highest tax-paying rates. Immigrants help our economy. We just got to make sure that they can come here legally. And if they are here, have a way, if they're paying their taxes and do whatever, have a way to get on a path where they can be legal. And then we gotta make sure the wrong people don't cross, and let's give everybody at the border their technology. So as you can see, I'm a little passionate about this subject, but I'm glad to have a partner in Senator Tillis in working on these issues. Thank you for the question.
I'm gonna go because I have the mic. Thank you for that. That was really fun to listen to. I was wondering because when I read the newspaper, I feel like I'm the victim of clickbait, and I end up reading stuff that is just so mean-spirited. And I wonder what the attitude you find is between your colleagues. Do you feel like in Washington it's
Yeah, so
hostile?
I'm sure all of you have heard of my colleague and TikTok star, Jeff Jackson. And he has done a great TikTok on this, talking about how the vast majority of our colleagues are not mean-spirited on both sides of the aisle. But we do have those bomb throwers, and I'm sure you've seen them in your offices and wherever you are. There are people who just, that's what, they wake up in the morning and think about how they can stir the pot and get attention. And I'm here to tell you, they're on both sides of the aisle. And I just basically stay away from them. Because the good thing about being in the House is there are 435 of us. I don't have enough time to talk to everybody every day, so I just talk to the people I like. And but it's very hard, in particular in the Judiciary Committee, because it attracts those kinds of people. All the people who want to be on TV and do all of that stuff, they all want to be on the Judiciary Committee. They want to be on the Oversight Committee, because that's where all of that happens. And so what I do is I just try to use my time to do things like talk about Morrisville, North Carolina. You know, we're going to have Secretary Mayorkas in the Judiciary Committee next week. And of course, that's going to get all this attention. Well, I'm going to talk about the documented dreamers for 5 minutes. And as you can see, I can clearly talk about them for more than 5 minutes. We had the head of the Federal Trade Commission in Judiciary. And of course, that was, you know, shots firing. And I talked about pharmacy benefit managers and how we have to get them under control. I mean, you can let somebody take your energy, or you can just go like this, keep going. That's what I try to do.
First of all, thank you for your service. Back when you were in the legislature, sometimes we darkened your door and you always welcomed us in. And also particularly thank you for going to Congress. One thing that's always bugged me is our national debt. I really don't know exactly what trillion we are in right now, but I used to give talks to Boy Scouts and say, by the way, the national debt is 30 trillion and we got this many. And I said, so that means you owe $70,000, you owe $70,000, and you owe $70,000. I asked them, what do you think we ought to do about that? Well, the answer was, let Canada pay for it. And I informed them that the Canadians were not interested in that, but it looks like that's something that's been going on for a long time and got exacerbated with Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, and there's not much going on anywhere to say we need to cut back on this and trim things back. So please comment, ma'am.
Yeah, so this is a problem. I'm not here to say it's not a problem. I'm happy to work on it. The big problem, and it goes back to what we're talking about with immigration reform. Every time the Republicans come in, all they want to do is cut taxes. And then they want to cut spending too. And the spending cuts that they're recommending right now are, you know, more than a 20% spending cut, which would also cut, you know, the VA, it would cut, you know, all education, it would cut all these things that people rely on. And then, you know, under Trump, there was a huge tax giveaway to the most affluent people. So that, of course, created a deficit, right? And then when we have a deficit, we have to borrow. The Democrats, I'm here to say, always want to invest more in things, right? And so we need to be smart about our investments. I like to invest in things like the National Science Foundation, things that will contribute to our economy. But we cannot keep cutting taxes for the most affluent people in our country. And then when the powers change, spend a ton more on other things. It's like a diet. It's like you gotta stop eating and start moving. And so we need to come to some kind of accommodation where rich people and corporations in particular pay their fair share, because there's some that pay zero, right? Zero, and they offshore, right? People pay their fair share for the privilege of doing business in the United States of America. And then we look at where we can trim certain unnecessary things that the federal government has been paying for years and years and years, and invest in the things that will grow our economy. So I know I'm not saying anything that you don't already know, but it's very difficult to do that in divided government. Is that my... You got the hook, Buck? Thanks so much.
Can I ask one more question?
Okay.
No?
One
No.
more question?
We're really just out of time. I'm sorry.
Well,
right.
I'll speak to you afterwards. How's that? I'll stay and speak to you afterwards.
Hold on just a second. We want you to take this book back to your seat and sign it for us, please.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
then we'll donate it to a library in your honor.
Okay, may I use this pen?
Yes, you may. Great. Thank you so much. Let me welcome Van and Emma and Dale and Bob and John today. Thank you for visiting with us. Please come again. We really want to see you. There's some misconception about what's happening next week. We are going to have a program of mediation. What happened, the person we had lined up for mediation, who is an authority on it in North Carolina and one of the chief individuals in training people to be mediators, has a illness in his family, and he cannot make it. But we have a commitment from Carolina Dispute Resolution Center to send a speaker for next week. I just don't have the name officially right now. We will have a program on mediation in North Carolina next week. And that'll be followed by Loretta Bonetti from Spectrum TV, and the following week after that, the Meredith golf team that was just featured in Golf Digest. So thank you for being with us today. It's a good week to be a Kiwanian. Enjoy yourself, and thank you, Congressman Ross, for being with us.